This week, we have a very special guest joining us, CubicleNate. Welcome to Destination Linux, where we discuss the latest news, hot topics, gaming, mobile, and all things open source in Linux. My name is Jill, and with me are two people with unhealthy obsessions, Michael with KDE and CubicleNate with openSUSE.
Well, it's an almost unhealthy obsession. Just
almost unhealthy.
Almost.
Yeah. And for me as well, except for it's definitely unhealthy.
So true.
Beautiful.
Michael and Nate. So we will also be discussing how OpenAI's CEO admitted they're on the wrong side of history when it comes to open source. Now, let's get the show on the road toward Destination Linux.
As you may have noticed, Ryan is not here this week for the episode. He's gone for a work trip, so he's not available to be a part of the show. But instead, we have brought in our very own CubicleNate. He's from the Linux Out Loud and Linux Saloon podcast here on Tux Digital. And so instead of the community feedback this week, we're going to hear from Nate, because he's also from the community. So we're going to get some feedback from Nate directly on the show. So Nate, welcome to the show.
Well, it's great to be here. I'm excited to be here. I was here once before, but you forgot. So it was that good.
Okay, so we talked about this before the show, and I said this is the first time he's ever been on the show. He says that's not true. It is the first time he's ever guest hosted on the show.
Correct.
But I also don't remember him being on the show. He said it. I looked it up. I couldn't find it. So I'm just going to have to accept that I could be wrong or pretend that I'm not wrong and just not believe it. I'm going to go with that one. I'm going to pretend I'm not wrong. And then, so let's go with that.
Aw. Once again, welcome, Nate. We're excited to have you on. It's about time.
I'm excited too. And hopefully I do okay, and then I can come back again.
Yeah, absolutely. I suspect you're going to be just fine, and we're going to have you back on in the future. Maybe while Ryan is here, we can have like a 4-person segment and stuff like that. So who knows? But I have very high expectations for you.
So we'll have 2 green backlights.
Yeah,
a blue.
Yeah, that'd be fine. We'll just put them on the corners. You both will be on the corners. That way, it wouldn't be too much green. Yeah, it'll be balanced properly. But anyway, thanks for coming to the show. And we're going to be talking about so much stuff. Of course, for everybody who's familiar with Nate, we're going to be talking about openSUSE, but that's coming up in a bit. So for those who don't know, muffins, yes. We didn't even get to it yet. He just preemptively made sure Ryan knew the answer is muffins. I love it. Okay. So for those who don't know, Nate has been part of the community for almost as long as I have. And he's also been part of the Tux Digital family for quite a while. So Nate is one of the hosts on the Linux Out Loud podcast, as well as the host for the Linux Saloon. Linux Out Loud is 3 ordinary people talking about how they use Linux in their daily lives. Sometimes they're even able to stay on topic. A lot of the time. Also, Linux Saloon is a Linux user group sort of thing that also happens to be a live show. The Linux Saloon is a place where you can discuss tech, open source, and my favorite slogan for the show is where Linux is always on tap.
Yeah, it's great.
You can join and catch Nate every Saturday herding the cats, serving up some Linux at Linux Saloon. So let's get to know Nate a little.
That's about right.
As any new guest on the show, we'd like to have how you became a Linux user, like how your destination became Linux. So what was your journey like to Linux, Nate?
Well, when I was a wee little lad, I've liked computers my whole life. So I'm a child of the 80s. And so my first computer was a Commodore 64, which turned into the Amiga. And the Amiga had a very Unixy-like shell to it. Didn't know if anybody knew that, but it is very Unixy-like as far as like how it handles the devices and so forth. And then then when the Amiga died out, so I apologize to those people who think it's never actually died. It's maybe more in the witness protection program. I went to Windows, and I did not enjoy it. I didn't like Mac at the time. Except I like this one though, but I didn't enjoy. Like, I just wasn't happy there. It just felt like an appliance to me. Something I played games on, something I did word processing on, something I did work on, but just there was no passion anymore. And then I kind of gave up a little bit, like on technology computers. I was just going to do. I was going into like controls engineer, but not engineer, just controls work on the like automated systems, kind of meandering into mechanical design. And that was the direction I was going to go. And then I came upon this thing called Unix. It was HP Unix. So I'm sure Jill has like a dozen of them in her stash someplace.
Of course,
really well built.
You don't even have to ask her.
They're wonderful. I love HP Unix.
And there's this thing on there called the desktop CDE. And I'm like, oh my gosh, virtual desktops. I want this. How much is it? 10 grand? I don't have money for that. I guess I'm just going to enjoy it here at work. And so someone said, well, why don't you try Linux? Like, I heard of that. It's the Penguin. I like penguins. And so I tried it out. And I don't have that first machine anymore, unfortunately, because I went through a purge some time ago, and and it's gone. Anyway, so
I think most people have that story, which is very sad because we don't keep our things. I think the only person on the planet is Jill that has everything.
I keep all my computers. Yes,
I envy that.
Yeah, me too. I wish.
Although, as an aside, I do have my dad's computer, but I was thinking about what I'm going to do with that. But anyway, so I started Mandrake Linux, which became Mandriva, and then I did some other hopping in there too, like Debian, of course. I played with Debian on PA RISC systems for a little bit, but I couldn't get the video to work right because there's some driver issues. And anyway, so I do have a couple of those old PA RISC systems, HP Unix. I should really turn them on to give them a good Jill over. But anyway,
Jill over, nice.
Well, where you make sure they're working, you do all the right things.
That's the stuff. Yeah.
The mature, adult, appropriate thing to do, but I'm not doing. I need to do that. Anyway, so I've been using basically Linux ever since. I did most of my learning. Like I'm an old retired soldier, so I actually learned most of my Linux from the man pages in a shipping container in the middle of Iraq. Believe it or not, and that's where I actually did most of my initial learning. Yeah, and so I still have that laptop. Yes. That laptop is still going. That I took there. It's a little worse for the wear, but it still works.
Nice.
And then I went to when Mandriva basically was fizzling out in the late, like around 2010 is actually when I went to openSUSE. Although I was kind of playing with it, dabbling with it. That and OpenSolaris. I don't know if you remember OpenSolaris, but that was kind of a cool thing I played with as well. Mm-hmm. And actually, when I got into the openSUSE side of things, and there's a lot of reasons I went with it, but I felt like it was. I felt like it was kind of like home, I guess, so to speak. And there I've been using Linux ever since. I've been it started a hobby of documenting things, and so I got to doing like publishing stuff on wikis, helping people in the forums, stuff like that. I haven't been doing much forum stuff lately, but I should. Anyway, and that's kind of how I got to here today. And Linux is still, although it may be it's actually part of my profession now as an IT professional, but it's still my hobby, it's still my passion. I mean, I still find ways like, how can I cram Linux into this part of my world? And I find a way to do it. And
nice.
It's been fun.
Learning it inside of a container with a laptop.
Shipping container.
A shipping container. Yeah, that's
amazing.
So in a way, before Linux had containers, you had Linux in a container.
Good
you know
point,
what?
Michael.
I didn't think about that. That is hilarious. I love it.
That was a good one, Michael.
It literally was like you used to like the Docker, like with the
exactly.
whale and those things.
The whale
that's exactly what I lived in for about a year. Yeah.
That's so funny.
Almost a year.
Well, this is awesome to have you on the show and to join us. And we're going to be talking more about Nate's experience with openSUSE because, of course, we are. Due to his almost unhealthy obsession, we have no choice but to talk about it. Right, exactly. So, but first, thanks for joining us, Nate. And it's crazy that this is the first. He said it's not the first time, but it's the first time that you've been on the show. So this is like we're not going to wait another few years to get you back on the show. But if you want to get your word on the show, you can send in your own feedback by going to destinationlinux.net/comments or destinationlinux.net/forum to send those in. As Linux users, we know what's up. Security is non-negotiable. But with threats getting smarter, your security tools need to keep pace without dragging your system down. And traditional agents, well, they slow you down, leave blind spots, and there's got to be a smarter approach. And that's why Destination Linux is proud to be sponsored by Sandfly Security, the revolutionary agentless platform designed for Linux. Sandfly doesn't just detect and respond, it revolutionizes security with SSH key tracking, password auditing, and drift detection, covering threats from every angle. Whether your systems are in the cloud, on-premises, or in embedded devices, Sandfly ensures they're all secure without the headaches of agent-based solutions. Now listen to what Ken Kleiner, the senior security engineer at the University of Massachusetts, has to say. He says, Sandfly is the first product I've seen that accurately and quickly detects thousands of signs of compromise on the Linux platform. Its unique method automates tasks which would be manually impossible. Automation is key with detection, and Sandfly completely fits this and other requirements. If your organization is using Linux, this should be part of your cybersecurity toolset. So experience security that's not just effective, but gives you peace of mind. No agents, no downtime, just cutting-edge protection. Dive into the future of Linux security at destinationlinux.net/Sandfly. That's destinationlinux.net/SANDFLY. And see how Sandfly can transform your security strategy. destinationlinux.net/Sandfly. Let's go back to Nate's unhealthy obsession with almost unhealthy obsession with openSUSE. So, we as far as the people who are part of the DuckSuser community, we know that Nate is a big fan of openSUSE. Anytime the topic comes up, openSUSE is definitely on the top of his list to talk about. But we have the question that needs to be asked that some people in the community, there's a lot of people not talking about SUSE and openSUSE. There's a lot of conversations about Ubuntu. There's a lot of conversations about Fedora and Red Hat, even Arch. But for some reason, openSUSE just kind of slips through the cracks of most people's attention. And so we now to ask Nate, why openSUSE?
Well, Bob, no, what I like about openSUSE is there's a number.
First of all, hold on. Is that a Barker reference or something?
Or Bob's your uncle?
It could be.
Which Bob? Which Bob?
It's whichever Bob you would like it to be.
Okay, cool, perfect.
When I was doing in my distro hopping stages of Linux, like between Mandrake, Mandriva, whatever, and openSUSE, I did quite a bit of hopping, and there were a number of things that I was really looking for. I wouldn't consider myself all that smart. I mean, I am ish smart, but sometimes if I can't remember the terminal command or I'm just feeling lazy, I like a nice GUI to do a task for me or something I know is consistent or whatever. And especially at that time in my Linux journey, I wasn't as big into the command line, believe it or not, because Mandrake was actually really easy to use. It had this Mandrake control center, and I wanted something like that. And so when I was jumping around, I was looking for something else that had a control center. And so then there's YAST, which is your favorite nomenclature, yet another system tool. I guess I know you love the yet another, Michael.
Yeah, another is the worst thing.
Your favorite?
Ever.
I know.
I hate it so much. It's the worst. It is basically the laziest way to name anything. So if I ever see a YA beginning a tool in Linux, it always disappoints me. YAST did it before I was even using Linux, so I guess there's a little bit of a grandfathered in situation. But anytime it happens now, just pure disappointment in my face.
Yeah, I can understand. So I was thinking yet another Linux podcast, Yelp. Is that a thing? It should be. And I think Michael should be on it. But
I should just get that YouTube channel and not allow it to exist.
just park something there and just say this is not allowed to exist.
Like this you cannot do this. Don't do this.
Do not subscribe. Exactly. Go away. Effective immediately. So the other thing too is I found I had better experience with RPMs over Debs, and it was a little thing. And I think there were just a few because I'd worked with Debian, on and off and whatnot, and so I just happened to like the RPM way more. And I'm not even sure why.
I like RPMs better. Well, I mean,
but I don't
the
really
way
have,
the
like,
RPMs are now are very different from what they were then anyway. So I think RPMs now are clearly better, and then it was debatable. But I'm sure we're going to have some people in the comments that are going to disagree with that.
Yeah, I'm sure. So, but again, it wasn't like I had a clear technical reason as to why I liked it better. I just happened to like it better. That was really it. Later on, after using SUSE for a while, also openSUSE had a nice wiki. So if you had something that had to be done, or whatever, if you're doing whatever task, it was easy to find something in the wiki and then also contribute to the wiki. Like all these things, like they gave a lot of like on ramps to being a part of the project, if that makes any sense. So that's another reason I liked it. And then shortly thereafter, using openSUSE, so I think like 2013 timeframe, 2014, whenever they started using like shoehorning Btrfs into it, and everyone's saying, "Oh, it's just terrible." They gave me this thing called snapshots, and I thought the snapshots were just awesome. So at the time, they had like a hybrid Btrfs and XFS for like Btrfs for the root and XFS for user. Now,
yeah, they had that for quite a while.
Yeah, and now it's all Btrfs. Like this is all Btrfs. So but I really appreciate that. So, early days of playing with Linux, I would break a system and then I couldn't fix it, reinstall it, mess with it, break it, reinstall it. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about there. The early days of just tearing your system up and having fun with computers, which is the whole reason I enjoyed Linux from the get-go, was I got to play with it and really just do stuff with it and make it my own. And then
and also back then you got to have a ton of fun breaking stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember myself breaking things constantly back then. Luckily, not too badly breaking, but it happens.
I never broke a CRT. I don't know, Jill. Did you ever break a CRT with a bad config?
No, I was always very, 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 very careful with that.
I was always very, 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 very lucky because I almost did it.
Yeah, Michael almost did it because he didn't have the numbers for.
I didn't know what the numbers were. I didn't even know that there was a difference. And I was like, I don't know, 13 or 12 or something when I first got started. I didn't know that there was a difference. And I was just playing with it. And then I go into an IRC room and they said, they found out how old I was. And they said, like, what did you do? How did you know about the CRT stuff? And I was like, what are you talking about? They explained it to me, and I found out that if you don't have the right hertz that your monitor is running at, then you can break your CRT just by installing the system. And because it's going to boot into this thing and it's just going to go crazy, and like basically the tubes will explode. I'm glad I didn't know that. I didn't find that out the hard way because I was a kid, and that would have been a hard thing to explain to my parents. But what happened is that they had like the 59 hertz and the 60 hertz, and I just chose 60 because it was a higher number and it sounded better. It turns out I was lucky and it was right. But also 59 I learned was the most common. So just the odds that I had, it was just some random configurations. But anyway, back to the openSUSE stuff. So like, what else is what happened is like, as far as like how openSUSE has now pulled you in, and they started building more and more to make it improvements. So where did the almost unhealthy obsession begin? With
the probably actually about the time when it became like a I would say actually about 2013 or so is when maybe 2014, when like it was, man, I really like this. This is really it really allowed me to do a lot of things. And then I think it became more of an obsession when because I didn't really listen to podcasts, or I wasn't really like involved in the greater Linux community until about 2016. That's actually when I discovered like the Linux Action Show, which I think that was everybody's first Linux podcast, I think, maybe, or at least our generation of users. And they would either poo-poo on openSUSE, not badly, but they would knock on it a little bit. And I'm like, or they would say things like, Bluetooth isn't good, or this isn't good. And I'm staring there looking at my computer on my Dell Latitude D630, thinking like, well, I've been enjoying Bluetooth now for like 4 years. What are they talking about? And I'm like, well, I got to start writing about this. And so I got the pen name, I guess if you can call it that, CubicleNate, which was actually given to me by a friend of mine who's in radio, and he gave that to me when I transitioned from full-time Army to working back in the civilian field. He says, "Well, you're not GI Nate anymore. Now you're CubicleNate." And at first, I'm like, "This is so insulting. I hate this." And then I'm like, "I like it."
Eventually, it just grows on you like a fungus.
Yeah, exactly. And exactly. So that's actually when it became more of not more of an obsession, not an unhealthy obsession, not an unhealthy obsession, but it became more of an obsession. And I wanted to like write about it because I was just really excited about different things I can do very happily in my openSUSE world. And I heard people complain like you can't have multiple desktops. This is a thing I heard. Like, I'm running multiple desktops. I mean, Plasma's the best, but I'm running multiple desktops. So I was really confused on a lot of this things. And so that's when I want to be more vocal about it, saying, hey, this will do these things. And then I got into the rolling distribution game. And then that further accelerated my asymptotal approach to obsession, unhealthy obsession with openSUSE. And also, and the community was just really great. So if I had questions or problems, I mean, don't get me wrong, some people, I mean, we're all technologists, so we're on different levels of the spectrum. And so some people don't, they just communicate very direct. But I grew up in a very direct household, so that was never a problem for me. I don't, sometimes people say, no offense intended. I'm like, well, none comprehended. So that's fine. And then...
Okay, I like that. I like that.
So it became, I really enjoyed the community. I enjoyed the technology. It's, even now, I know like I have little gripes with it, things that I wish were just a rough edge that they could just really take care of if they just did one little thing. And I think, Michael, we probably agree on what those things are. But for the most part, like as a tool that I use that allows me to be happy with my technology, it just seems to fit the bill the closest because it allows me to use the same software set on my 32-bit machines. And yes, I still have quite a few of those that I keep updated. My Core 2 Duos, which surprisingly, Plasma 6 works great on my Latitude D630 that I still have. Like
that's shocking.
Those are still very good machines.
They are. I use that sometimes. If I don't want to take my framework off of my 7-screen thing that I have going on right here, because sometimes not all the screens turn back on. In fact, this one just turned off for whatever reason, and I'm not going to turn it back on. But anyway.
Well, that's how you know you have too many screens when you have to sit back and count them.
Yeah.
A lot of times I have to, I added this one recently over here because I just needed one more. It's in the battle stations on the Discord. So if you're a part of the Discord group, Discord of Tux Digital, it's we have the battle station subsection. So you can actually see pictures of it there.
Yeah.
Nice.
But they look great too. I like it a lot.
We'll have a link for those who are curious to join the Discord server. But if you want to just type it in right now, it's tuxdigital.com/Discord.
For me, what's important is that when I go to use my computer, that it's ready for me to be able to use it. It's more like this is going to sound like I'm some kind of a lonely person. I'm really not. But like, to me, my computer is kind of like my friend, like the friendly computer. What was whose was the friendly computer? Was it the Commodore 64, the friendly computer? Is that what the slogan is or something like that? Yeah. So I want my computer to be friendly. And friendly doesn't necessarily mean, easy. That's something else. But what it means is that like, it's there to help me, it's there to, kind of be my support, I guess. And so I feel like my computer with openSUSE has been basically like a support. Every once in a while, we have our falling out a little bit, like with anything, but it's very rare. And for the most part, it's just been a great, reliable ride for me. Not perfect, but nothing is, especially if I'm using it. But it's been great. And then it's allowed me to do things like I can still mess with it. Like, even though this is my production machine, like if this machine goes down, I'm in a bad spot. But I still play. I still do things like, can I do this one little thing with it? And sometimes I can't. Sometimes I can. Sometimes it requires a bit of a hardware change somewhere else, like a different dock station. But I can do these fun things, and I'm enjoying the whole ride. Like I've never been happier with a computer, running openSUSE on my Framework 13 than I ever have been. And I've loved all my computers coming up. I still have them all except one. And so like that's kind of where I am. And so I'm just really excited to like I'm gleefully using my computer because of just how great the openSUSE ride has been. And
awesome.
Maybe are there some rose tinted glasses in there? Probably.
No, they're definitely not rose tinted glasses. They're SUSE green tinted glasses.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
They're green. Nate,
Well
what
played.
is your favorite release of openSUSE? Do you like Leap or Tumbleweed? What is
For
your
my daily
favorite?
drivers, and I have multiple daily
Yeah.
drivers, I use Tumbleweed because here's the other little thing too. I'm also lazy. So the nice thing about openSUSE is it allows me to be lazy. And we've actually talked about this before, I think, in the Tux Digital community, but I've had, not this machine, because I update this one probably weekly or so, but I've had machines that like I didn't update, like I was thrown on a shelf and I forgot about it. And so I didn't update it for 18 months. And it was a little netbook. And I did a sudo zipper dup. And it took a while for it to grind out. But 3,000 some odd packages later, I could still use it. And I was actually just using it recently. Yeah. And so the fact that it's so resilient and tolerant to my poor sysadmin hygiene, I guess we'll call it, it is great. It's, like I said, like a friendly computer. When I mess up and I don't do everything right, it's still going to tolerate my misgivings, I guess, is what it comes down to. So
I had a very similar experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did my own test for not exactly the same 18 months, but it was basically a year. And I had about 2,500 packages. And it was in the same situation where I had a drive that I just had installed and never even paid attention to. And I just thought, oh, what's on here? And I booted it. And I guess I have to try this and see what happens. It worked fine. Like, it was a little annoying for how many times it asked me, are you sure you want to continue? Like,
yeah.
That's okay once or twice.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 times. But after about an hour of doing it and the number was at 25 or 30, I was a little annoyed. So hopefully they don't do that anymore. But there was a lot to change.
Oh, well, it's so funny, Nate, because I'm using Tumbleweed right now on a laptop, which I use regularly, which I love. But for work, I'm still using Leap because I was using openSUSE for a render farm for RenderMan for many years, and I've just kept that on Leap because that software doesn't change, and I don't need to update it constantly because it's just meant for one purpose.
Now, I will say as a caveat to that, I have, and this is not trying to jump sections here because it's in the notes, but I do have systems in the enterprise space where I do prefer Leap because I don't want those things to change. I have too many things that are linked into it. And I know, sometimes when you change a library, like things wig out. And so I don't want to have to deal with that because, so for those particular purposes, I use Leap. But anything that I have in my home, it's Tumbleweed. Even my server that I built this past summer, I replaced the server that I put together in 2019 with some retired Dell PowerEdge R710, and I put I had to replace the RAID card in there because you can only handle up to 2 terabyte drives, and I got 8 5 terabyte drives, so I put out RAID 5, and so it's about 32 terabytes of storage. I'm not going to run out of storage anytime soon, but I put Tumbleweed on that, and the reason for that is because I'm not running any critical thing. I'm not running anything super critical. It's just files, media server, and other little Minecraft stuff, things like that. So I don't have to. Doesn't have all the little tentacles in it, so I don't have to worry about that breaking. And also, it allows me to once. I should do it probably more often, but about once every couple of months. That's actually when I do the updates, and then I reboot it, and everything's fine. And I have Cockpit on there, and I do other experiments. It's like my home lab experimentation thing that I use as well. So I've had 0 issues with that since getting it set up. And so I guess for me, it's I can't say it's not reliable. And I do actually, in one location, and I'm not going to say where, of between the 2 plants, and I'm the IT manager, I do have one Tumbleweed box that is doing something critical, but it's the only system I could get to work the way I wanted it to work. So I just went with it.
Nice.
I mean, it's also, one of the things I would feel like if I was going to put any rolling distro, it would be Tumbleweed. Like any rolling distro that's in enterprise or whatever would be Tumbleweed because
absolutely.
The snapshot and the rollbacks and stuff like that.
Right.
just to have that built into the system. I would still probably not do it unless I really had to. But there's, I would be comfortable with that sort of setup.
Yeah. So, and then I have like Leap as a NAS for a NAS function for a VMware cluster in one of the locations as well. But all it does is just serve files. So it's like it doesn't do much. Doesn't have a GUI. Doesn't have a monitor. It's just a headless machine, and that works really well. Which also another really cool thing about openSUSE, and I don't know if this is with all Linux, but I know with openSUSE or the family of distributions, that if you don't have a monitor, the installer knows to open up a serial port, so you can do the full install through, like a serial cable.
Yeah, a dummy
to do it.
Yeah.
Whatever, and you can do the install with just a console, like an actual old school console. It automatically opens that stuff up. So that's cool. That's pretty cool too.
I did not know that. That's interesting. Two things: super odd that that's even a possibility. I respect it because some people do have that hardware. Second thing is, did you just have a serial connector to a USB? Is that what you just showed up? What is that?
Yeah. So this is I can. This is totally an aside. Now, I put on an old WatchGuard firewall box that's also retired hardware. I put OPN Sense on there, and so I needed to be able to. It does not have any video out. So the only way to do the install is I use Minicom on my computer. I just did this. That's why it's sitting here. I just did this I think last weekend. And
nice.
Sorry, I meant to clean my desk before Jill got here. I apologize. But
Jill probably has just as many things on her desk, I would bet. And half of them are penguins.
Here's the funny thing. I am actually extremely OCD. So no, I like my desk clean, but all my things are, stored in drawers and whatnot. So, yeah.
I wish I was as cataloged as Jill. We had a conversation one time about all her computers, and turns out she has a catalog of everything. It's all labeled and organized, and she knows where everything is. I barely know where my clothes are.
So Nate, that's cool that you use that serial adapter. I've used a lot of the headless adapters on HDMI ports and DVI and VGA on Linux because they, recognize those, of course. But it's nice with openSUSE because it's already built in.
Yeah, it's already baked in. It's nothing to balk at, and which is one of the things I'm a little worried about, like long term, if that, like with the new installer system, because frankly, that's an edge case. I mean, unless you're dealing with like enterprise hardware, you're not going to run into a system that doesn't have some sort of video out.
Like that is such an edge case. I didn't know it was even needed. Like,
oh my god,
that is a super edge case, but it's cool that they have it, and maybe they'll have an option where you can still use the legacy installer if you wanted to have that sort of setup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it would just be like a grub set option, really, so it would be no problem. I think.
Yeah.
So earlier you mentioned about how you're doing some enterprise stuff with openSUSE. You said that Linux went from being a hobby and turned into a professional stuff. Tell us about that.
Well, so it started out, Linux has been a hobby. So because of the whole, my falling out with technology, like my dark ages of tech is like from 1998 to 2002. I was like using Windows 98. I didn't enjoy it. It wasn't fun for me, except for playing Descent 3. That was the only real reason I cared about it. Anyway, Loki installer for Linux Descent 3. I got that later on, but that's another story. So it was a hobby, and it just became fun. And actually, I made a point to kind of hide my technology proclivities when I was in the military, because I didn't want to get stuck in an office. I didn't want to have like that. I just wanted to be like a rifleman, run around outside, do soldiery things, and so. Eventually what had happened there is I had this, I'm going to be careful because he I don't know if he like watches any of the stuff I do, because he could. But but he got very he would get very upset at his computer. He may have thrown furniture in the office. He may have broken some things and frightened people. So after several weeks of this, I decided it would I decided I would help him with his computer problems. And so I went and it was an issue with Outlook, which I can understand that even now. Outlook is still frustrating, but I showed him how to fix that, and he called me Opie, and he got all when I showed him that I knew how to fix that thing with his computer, he got all excited, like Opie from Andy Griffith. Apparently I look like Opie. I don't know. I think my nose is too big for that. He's like, he threw some colorful words together and said, "Wow, Opie, you fixed this," and some more colorful words. And then he started farming me out to anybody else that had problems. And that was kind of the end of it, where basically I got sucked back into technology. And, so I couldn't, basically, we were meant to be together, and I tried getting away from it. And then, so that's just how it went. So anyway, it went from being a hobby, specifically Linux. And then, between my CubicleNate.com website, writing the wiki pages, a great career decision that was made by the company that laid me off. It was the best career decision of my life that I got laid off from that job. Like I'm so thankful. I mean, I can't tell you how thankful I am that they laid me off. Like at the time I was kind of like bummed about it, but I'm like, whatever, everything will be fine. But the fact they laid me off opened up all new kinds of opportunities. That's actually about the time I got more involved in Tux Digital, doing podcast stuff and writing and building all these things, even more so because I had the time, and I was doing like side gigs. And then some of those side gigs kind of like dried up a little bit. And then I had an Army buddy that said I needed to put in a resume to be the IT manager of this manufacturing facility. And so I said, well, I didn't go to school for IT. I didn't do all these things. He says, yeah, I know. I said, but I've watched you for the last 15 years do all these things in the military, how you did, how I reshaped a Wi-Fi bubble so I could use Wi-Fi in Africa, things like this. He was impressed by how I manipulated technology to help our company out and deploy different things. And so he says, I should apply. I says, I know, but I'm like, I don't really know Windows very well. And he says, it'll be all right. Just please just give me your resume. You don't have to apply. I will hand my resume to them. So then so they, long story short, they gave me the job, not because of my resume, but because they saw CubicleNate.com. They saw the stuff I did on the openSUSE wiki pages. And also they started lurking, and they saw Linux Saloon and also saw Linux Out Loud. And so they knew I had a passion for the technology. They knew that I was how do they put that? I was a divergent thinker or something along those lines. I wasn't like, they wanted somebody outside of the industry. They wanted to pull somebody that was a little bit different into it because they wouldn't think like everybody else. And so they wanted me to be a part of this. And it's been great. Now, my predecessor, who I don't want to say his name in case he wants anonymity, but he's actually, he is in the Tux Digital community, and I see him, he's pretty active. And if he wants to say, hey, that was me, he can say that. But I'll leave that to him to do. But he already is an open source fan. He uses a lot of Debian. And so there's already, when I came here, a lot of like automated administrative functions for managing data and information was already been written on, between Debian VMs, some Raspberry Pis around, which then, like when you say Raspberry Pi, that's like my love language, And so they're around there. And so it's been fun, that whole thing. And then he designed, it's on GitHub, it's a bot, that manages, pulling down emails and like sorting things so they can, manifests for arrivals and everything else can all be done in a nice, clean way, and get rid of, automate the tasks that should be automated, essentially. And so I'm learning a lot of what he has done, and then kind of re-implementing those things, which I'm working on right now to do that. But anyway, so that's been good. And then what I'm doing now is I'm incorporating any more open source wherever it's possible. So about half-ish of the servers are Linux and half are Windows, which, by the way, Windows should never be a server. Windows Server, if you work on Windows Server and you like it, God bless you. But no, it's
Windows
they
is barely usable as a desktop, and I would argue that it's not even that. But the server, the only time I ever experienced Windows Server was the last time, and because it was so painful that it was just like, why does this even exist? Like, what is the point? Who thought this was who thought Windows was a good idea, but who thought this was a good idea? Like it collapsed, I think 4 times in one day, and no, we're done. I'm done with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they had, it's better now because we've upgraded the systems, which is why some other things happen. But one of the web servers was a window, it was a front end for basically a database. It ran on a Windows server. And so it was kind of like a weekly task. You really have to reboot it weekly because it starts to have an aneurysm, I think. I don't really know how to say it nicely. And just start breaking down. Anyway, so that aside, now that's actually a Kubernetes thing now, so it's much more, it's modernized, and so it's much better. But the what had happened was I didn't want to just kind of force my openSUSE ways on the company, because if it doesn't make sense, I'm not going to just change it. But as I've been there, we were doing things like we retired our two VMware two servers that had VMware on them, and because the Broadcom, who I appreciate Broadcom and that they make chips for my Raspberry Pi, so I give you some happiness there. But what they've done to VMware has basically been awful. So it became very difficult to use VMware. Their support really fell through the bottom. The sales rep that we use for our software, because we have a company that basically is our vendor for software, and they basically said, well, frankly, VMware, they don't really want to work with a business your size anyway. So I looked into a bunch of options, and so I ended up, because I'm have an almost unhealthy obsession with openSUSE anyway, I went to SUSE. They weren't my only stop, but I went to SUSE and looked at their virtualization options, which is SUSE Harvester, which I guess they renamed as something else. You told me
SUSE. They do it. They renamed it to something very simplistic of like SUSE virtualization. They renamed a bunch of stuff to SUSE something that's more of describing what it is rather than having its name. Except I think Rancher is still called Rancher. I think.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And actually, their storage is called Longhorn. It's called Harvester, like how they have their hypervisors is basically runs Harvester, and then so it kind of has like a farm theme which fits the industry I'm in. So that's kind of cool, and it was actually a good sales pitch too. By the way, calling it Harvester for the people that above me.
Awesome.
So I told that to my rep at SUSE, and oh, well, that's good to know. Well, we changed it. Anyway, I don't care. So using that, and by the way, support-wise, SUSE has been fantastic. I'm really impressed with them. They, as part of their sales pitch, and I'm gonna really boil this down, but they said basically, I said, well, why SUSE? Why not go with any number of your competitors? And they're like, well, we'll try harder and we're cheaper. Okay, well, that makes everybody else happy. So, and frankly, it's been great. The transition, migrating the virtual machines off of VMware and putting them on Harvester, not a single problem to speak of.
That's good.
So that's been great. Deploying Rancher, we're doing some test things of deploying a Rancher clusters. That's been fun, and we're doing that. So we're kind of modernizing some of our workflows too, and they're helping with that. And anywhere there's any other opportunities for open source, I've been trying to incorporate that as well. So I may not get this as a win right now, but I'm working on the maintenance folks, because they're not real happy with what they're using for facility management, maintaining facilities. So there's something called OpenMaint, MAINT, and that is a system for managing your factories, your manufacturing facilities, or any kind of facility really for that matter. And so that I think is pretty cool. And so looking at that as well to see if we can self-host it, and then also make it less expensive for us to do that. Although I would probably get a service contract with them anyway to help us make those transitions, because I don't want to have that. I don't want to stick my entire neck out there. Someone else can stick their neck out too. So, and they'd be fine with that. So anyway, that's been great. And then also, a couple of my big openSUSE wins that I've had is we needed we have a facility in Texas, one in Michigan. The one in Texas, we were at our limit for storage on the VMware cluster, and so we had to add storage to it. And so I ended up getting it's a server, but has just tons of drive, like 20 drives in it, basically. And so we needed a lot of storage. So it's like 10, I think it's after the RAID, it's around 10 terabytes or something like that, 10, 12 terabytes. I can't remember now exactly what. Maybe it's more than that. Anyway, and so I put openSUSE Leap on there, and that made that turn that into the NAS basically that would be serve through NFS to the VMware cluster, and that's working great. Everyone's happy, so that kind of saved me. And then more excitingly, we stood up a new manufacturing subunit. We'll just call it that. And so it's had to be like a separate business unit. And the original, when I scoped out the storage for the original operational technology side of the facility, I wanted enough additional storage so we could accommodate any of the new servers, VMs that we had to be running for this manufacturing process. And so I went and I sized it accordingly. And then I had this, as we're getting ready to hook everything up, they basically said, well, we can't do that now. We have to keep it completely separate. And also we don't think we have the storage space, the computational and RAM that can do. It can't push it. We don't want to push it any harder than it already is. So we want to separate it out. And then I'm like, well, then we're going to need, about at least $12,000 for new hardware or even refurbished to do this. And like, well, we don't have budget for that. Can you figure something out? And then that's when I got all excited. I love that. So like when somebody says that, I'm like, you just gave me a license to do what I like to do, which is what ridiculous. How can I put together something ridiculous? In my mind, maybe a little ridiculous to them. They wouldn't care, but create something out of just what I have off the shelf. So like I went I went through the actually with the help of the engineer down there, who took me pictures of everything. So I did a bunch of research on what we had, and I saw them before, and so I said I want that machine, and I realized it's way past end of life, and so then I went through and I ordered the right RAM for it as an HP ProLiant. I can't remember what the nomenclature, but it's a Gen 8. So basically, it's like two generations ago. And it was like the first server they used one of the two first servers they used when they brought the plant online, and they were very quickly taken offline because they were not powerful enough. So between upgrading the RAM storage and CPU, it was well more than what I needed to do this the new plant. And so I basically says, can I have $1,200? And they said yes. And so I built it, put it together. I was a little nervous because I took a trip down there. I didn't know if anything worked ahead of time. Like I didn't know if the RAM had any problems. I didn't know if the CPUs had any problems. I didn't know if anything, the drives were well. And somehow it all worked out. It ran. I put openSUSE on there with Cockpit. And that's now the virtualization, whatever, my virtualizer for these 3 Windows VMs, which, I found out after everything was set up that we actually could have used Linux for those VMs because everything on that stack would have been, I totally could have done Linux, but I did not know that. They asked for something. So maybe at the next upgrades, I can switch it over. But yeah, so I saved them quite a bit of money, got that going. Everybody's happy. Nobody cares that it's running Linux. All they care is that it's working and we're getting backups. I can take snapshots off of that. I got all the fun tools to make sure that we have resiliency, and
nice.
It's just been a ton of fun. It's great how I've been able to turn that hobby into a profession that's as fun as the hobby. Like I get to literally I don't tell my boss this, but I get to play every day and they just don't know it. And so it's been great.
Well, I hope they don't watch this then. So, because otherwise they'll know that you've been playing.
Aw, your creativity and your, working through problems and getting to tweak things. That's part of what makes you very special, Nate. It really is.
Well, thank you.
You think outside of the box. And that's what I like too.
Yeah, I guess a divergent thinker, I guess, is what I am.
Yes, divergent.
I've been described as eccentric also. I don't even know what that means. I looked it up.
I would say well-rounded, very creative, passionate about your work and your love of Linux and open source. And yeah.
Yeah, all of those are definitely an accurate way to describe Nate, but also
Yeah.
the stuff about getting everything running and going into the taking something that would typically cost $12,000 and doing it with $1,200 because they just said figure it out. That is definitely like for those who don't know, like Nate, we've known Nate for many years. And there's been many examples that is just like joy for Nate of like, we're going to figure this out. And even if it takes like this weird hodgepodge of components and stuff to make it work, we're going to make it work. So I think that the guy who told you to put the resume in was 100% like instrumental in making this like such a great story because the playground of Nate has only gotten bigger. And we all get to hear about it and experience it with you. So that's awesome.
And they say, like, I was told, it's going to be your call for the most part. And I'm like, cool.
Yeah, freedom.
It has been. And I won't say I've necessarily tested the limits, but I kind of I see where I can go with things, and I'm testing limits in other areas too. I've got a whole list of things that I think I can do, and I've got a test unit. I actually know downstairs now because that was something else I was doing here recently, and I have another potential way. I want to trim the budget. I want to trim the IT budget. I think I can. I'm looking to try and trim about $3,200 a month out of the IT budget, and we'll see if it works out. It's either going to work or it's not, and but the journey will be fun, I guess.
Nice. That's all that matters, really.
Yeah.
If you're enjoying the work and that sort of stuff, because a lot of people don't get to enjoy their work, and being able to do that is awesome. And I think that for those who are curious about like trying out openSUSE, what is like your final pitch, your elevator pitch for openSUSE? If someone's interested in it, you got 30 seconds. Go.
openSUSE is yours. You can shape it the way you like, and you can break it and fix it like it never even happened.
Nice. I like it. Although, by the way, for those who don't know, I have used openSUSE in the past, and I think it is very much underrated. So if you are curious, go check it out. It's not for everyone, just like nothing is for everyone. Like there's no such thing as a distro for everyone. And I wouldn't say openSUSE is necessarily beginner friendly, but for power users, there's tons of stuff to play with, as Nate has described in this episode.
Now, the one caveat I will say to that, though, is like I've installed, DOS and Windows 95 and so forth. If you grew up in the era of the 90s technology, it's not hard. Like if you did that back then, it's pretty straightforward. If you haven't,
that means, not a beginner.
If you haven't,
yeah.
MX Linux is great for that.
OpenAI's CEO, Sam Altman, has admitted something in an AMA for Reddit that is something that we all knew. We've mentioned this multiple times on the show. And he says that they may have been wrong on the wrong side of history when it comes to the open source strategy of the company. And by that, he means zero openness, because they decided to abandon open source a while ago when money got involved. At least that's my opinion. So this marks a significant acknowledgement from one of the leaders in AI development, and especially with the competition from China, like DeepSeek and the other models that are being made that are open source. There's a lot of competition these days, just trying to tear away at the stranglehold that OpenAI has on the market. And Google's also doing their own competition, but without the open source. There's so that like all of the effort putting into the open source AI has got some of them a bit scared, which as I showed last week, I'm not bothered by them being scared by this. I feel like that's something that is necessary for this to kind of expand. But what are your thoughts on this, Jill?
Oh boy, I'm actually really excited for the competition that especially DeepSeek is creating with using an open source AI, and Hugging Face and others we have talked about.
Hugging Face is the best name ever.
Yes, I love that name. And it's so awesome that even OpenAI has realized their shortcomings of using proprietary, and they shouldn't have changed to a proprietary format. And we've talked about this here on the show for many reasons. And the tech community at large has awesomely woken up about the importance of a truly open AI ever since DeepSeek came into the picture. And before then, you remember, Michael, we were talking about doom and gloom articles.
Yeah.
Oh,
Open source AI is going to be the worst. It's such a dangerous idea. And then now we're like, oh, maybe this was good.
Yes.
Yeah, of course it is.
And like we said, like I said last week when we were discussing DeepSeek, leave it to open source AI to be more cost effective, take a lot less energy to run and be more memory efficient. And it has a system of checks and balances built in. And people are realizing, wow, yeah, we need open source AI. So we've known it for years here on Destination Linux, but some of the big companies haven't understood that yet until now. Now they're being challenged.
Eventually, they'll all understand it, but at least now we feel like there's an element where some of them are.
Yeah,
there is a little bit of an asterisk next to this thing, because in that comment, Sam said that he believes that they're on the wrong side of history for the open source aspects of it. But he also said that it's not up to him to make the decision. So that's a nice way of saying that open source good, but we're not going to do anything about it. That's how I interpreted it. Maybe I was wrong in my interpretation, but it feels like he's just, kind of pandering of saying open source is great, but I can't. As the CEO, I don't have power, apparently. So what does the CEO do? Who knows? Who knows, people? Apparently, they just comment on Reddit questions and that's it.
Yeah.
Because apparently they don't have power. So what else could we expect them to do except just be on Reddit all the time?
Right.
So Nate, what are your thoughts?
So of course, I'm a big advocate for open source technology. I'm a little bit unsure on what AI is going to bring. On one hand, I see Star Trek: The Next Generation and the view that the future's bright. It can help us as a companion to help us get things done. And on the other side, I look at it as, is this a technology we're going to become addicted to that actually causes more separation with people and not bring it together? So that's my concern from there. As far as I think if it were not open source, I would be very concerned, just in general, because at least if it's open sourced, then the code can be audited. It can check for things that are nefarious in there. You can do things to work on it to make, if it's a truly positive humanitarian type project, then it's not going to be used to hurt people. And that's what concerns me is, with great power comes great responsibility, as we all know that trope. And so I'm hoping that we will collectively be responsible with that technology. And the fact that it is in the open source does tell me that there's a greater possibility of it being positive, because I think for the most part, the open source world has not been 100% positive, but for the most part, it's been more positive. It's been a net positive to humanity. It's been a net positive for so many things that this alleviates a lot of that concern. So that's how I feel about that.
Totally agree. Just the Linux itself as an open source project has been a net positive for the entire planet, and therefore open source has benefited from that. And you can also apply this to a ton of different projects. But there's like what you're saying is, I completely agree that the open source is something that I would require it to be in order for me to fully embrace the AI aspects of it, the AI overlords, obviously. And I would need them to be open source. And this is good news in the sense that OpenAI has recognized their mistakes, but it's not necessarily seemingly changing just yet.
The net positive, that's what matters to me the most. When I look at like what open source has done for technology, it's actually done a lot. Also, I love technology, but I don't like the e-waste that has gone along with it. And the fact that we have open source there to reduce the e-waste that we have essentially, because it extends the life of a lot of things. And so that, to me, that's huge. But the other thing too is, I think with AI being open sourced and becoming more efficient, I think that's going to reduce the likelihood of us dumping more things into landfills or going through the process of having to recycle things and wasting all that energy. So I think it's a net positive. And I think that this guy is he should have realized that long ago. And I'm glad that he's finally realizing it. I applaud him for Mr. Altman for realizing his mistakes. I wish he would have realized it sooner, but at least he did realize it. And I like the whole redemptive arc for everything and everybody.
Yeah, I like that too. I'll give it like a mini golf clap for realizing it, but also if he wants an actual clap, then he needs to implement it.
Right.
So we'll see what happens there. But the next topic we're going to cover is a really interesting thing that is very confusing. The sentence I'm about to tell you does not make sense. I will just tell you up front, this does not make sense. It shouldn't be a thing, but someone on the internet has decided that Linux has to be running on absolutely everything. And that includes inside of a PDF.
So why not?
Sure, why not? Like I appreciate having Linux on everything. I have a motto of like Linux is everywhere, right? And there's even a t-shirt on the store of tuxedos.com/store where you can get the Linux is everywhere shirt. But to put it inside of a file that also goes on top of another platform. Jill, tell us all about what happened here.
Yeah, so user VK6, he actually achieved this by compiling a RISC-V emulator to JavaScript and embedding that in the PDF document. So,
of course, as one would do.
So this elevates the PDF document to a much higher status than a static file that, we think about it. We've thought about it for years. And to me, this was really quite exciting. In fact, I ran it earlier today before the show.
Of course you did.
I wanted to play with it. And it is cool because it has actually a virtual keyboard for input. And there's a text box which captures user input and translates it to PDF actions. So it's kind of like, what would you call it? It's kind of like when you program a keyboard, kind of like a macro.
Yeah, nice.
And you're programming it to do a certain function, but it's a document.
That is crazy. So that's very cool. I think that this is a super awesome idea, and I give you mad props. As a VK6, mad props VK6 for doing this. I don't know why you would want to have done it, but I respect it. And also thanks for adding more proof that you can pretty much put Linux on anything.
Yeah. Oh, and even more exciting, it uses ASCII text fields. Yay, I love ASCII arts. AA library for the win.
Nice.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And speaking of RISC-V, we also have some more news about RISC-V. And also we're going to put all these together. Nate was talking about how he's been using frameworks and stuff. And now we're going to be talking about RISC-V motherboard for frameworks. They have just released it. It's now available for the laptop 13. Somehow I was about to say lapteen. I don't even know. And you can get this. You can get this RISC-V mainboard for $199. And it was originally announced last year, and they followed it up with like an access program in November. but now you can actually get it. So if you want to, if you already have a laptop 13 from Framework, you can do a drop-in replacement, put in this RISC-V mainboard. And in a way that, because the process of, now I haven't actually changed a mainboard in a Framework. I imagine one of you have. What is the process? Is it as simple as they make it seem?
I would say yes. I think the count was, I don't remember where I stuck it on the notes, but we've put together, I think, like 30-ish frameworks now, and
Wow.
they're very easy to work on. So the main board, you can take out, I mean, it's not, I mean, to swap out a screen is less than 10 minutes to swap a screen out on a framework, which is awesome. And then the main board, you just got to make sure you pull out the expansion cards, remove your Wi-Fi, remove your there's another little card you want to probably get out of the way, and then you can actually take the battery and that out altogether. You can just leave the battery in there and whatever. It's not going to take but maybe 15 minutes to swap out a main board. And,
oh wow!
And so it's not a big deal. Yeah, it is so simple and easy, and it's so well thought out. Like, everything about this computer is just beautiful. And then the fact that they make it so you can use that mainboard anywhere. So, for instance, the fact that they have a $200 RISC-V mainboard. Now, they say it's for like enthusiasts or developers, people who want to like work with it, not for regular use. I like how they're very upfront with that, for number one, and because it has 8 gigabytes of onboard RAM. And then anyway, so there's no way to add more RAM. But anyway, the point is, I could very easily take that, and this might surprise you, but I do silly projects. I have like this idea and I just go run after something.
No way. There's no way after this previous conversation that you have silly projects. No, okay.
I would love to just get a main board. You don't have to put it in a case. You can 3D print a little thing for it to hold it.
Yeah.
And you could have all kinds of fun with that thing. And it's amazing. I mean, I was just thinking, this is just tangentially, but we talked about RISC-V in a PDF. Well, somebody actually compiled RISC-V emulator for the 6502 processor, which is what basically, the 6510 is in the Commodore 64. So with a RAM expanded Commodore 64, you can run emulated RISC-V and Linux on that. Not a great experience, but it can be done. It takes days to compile. But anyway, the point of that is, I was just thinking, you could take like this RISC-V board, and you could actually probably throw it in like a Commodore 64 case, because why not? I'm so hopeful for RISC. I really am.
Me too.
I think this is going to be neat, I think, to see.
Yeah, I think the RISC-V, the fact we were talking about RISC-V on the show like a couple of years ago, about how we hope that it becomes this new an actual like fully adopted platform, because the architecture is so cool. It's open source and all of that. And it was still in the early stages of everything was everything was kind of expensive and everything was not very powerful. And now you can literally take an existing framework laptop and put it in there and have a RISC-V on it. And it's not that expensive. And it's not super powerful, but it's pretty powerful. 8 gigs of RAM is not, nothing to sneeze at or anything. So right. I think that this is really cool. And I don't have a framework. I wish I did. Framework, if you're listening, wink, wink, send me one. And that would be great. But there's so much cool stuff with the idea of having this architecture a part of the framework family. I mean, it's just, I think it's super cool.
Yeah. And I'm just personally excited now that RISC-V has become inexpensive enough that the average user can get a hold of it. And, back in the early 90s and the late 80s, when I was working with digital equipment systems and RISC systems, I mean, those were $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 computers, like my DEC Alpha. And now we have that power on a little board, a little SBC.
Awesome. Yeah.
It's just amazing. And now it's available for the consumer market instead of the enterprise and IT and prosumer. So that's just this is very exciting. And I've been waiting for this technology to finally, we got RISC-V open source, and now all these companies can make their own RISC chips. Isn't that exciting, Nate?
It is. And what I'm hoping is the one thing that x86 does have going for it that the other platforms do not is the fact there's a standard for how the boot is supposed to happen. So we can have one image that'll work on multiple x86 chips, whether it's AMD or Intel or Cyrix. Cyrix? Is that what it's called? Cyrix? Don't exist anymore. Doesn't matter. But the point is, the fact that they had a framework of how things are initialized, whether it's the most efficient or whatever. Obviously, it's not. It probably isn't. But if the open source community can build that same sort of openness, I guess, from that closed system, a more like an open version of that, where we can ensure that like ARM, the ARM chips, it's kind of a mess, and it's got to be supported and really dug into and everything else, and all, like a lot of these phones we can't really reutilize because
they're pretty much locked to what they were. Yeah.
Right. And so that's unfortunate. So I'm very hopeful, but I'm a consummate optimist. So, I'm not the best guy to go to for like, is something good or not? I'm like, yeah, it's great. But I'm really hoping that this will do one of two things. One, it will produce an ecosystem of open hardware that people can very easily, like the tools are there to very easily build images for. And I'm also hoping it will kick Intel and AMD's complacency a little bit as far as the efficiency of their cores as well. So this is nothing but good news for everybody. Competition is great. We all win with competition in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And speaking of winning, let's talk about games that you can win in. Well, that's a weird transition, but we're going to talk about something that's really cool that was just announced thank you so much. That it's just announced this week that the Flathub Hearts games. What does that mean, Jill?
Yeah. So as Michael was saying, something cool for Linux gaming is happening over at Flathub, and it makes us very, very happy. So Flathub, as a lot of you may know, but for our new users who don't know, it's a Linux software store for apps and games across multiple distros that we've, talked about here on Destination Linux almost each and every week. it gets mentioned very often. And it is actually the default app store on Valve Steam Deck when you're in desktop mode via Discover. And I use the Flathub store a lot, especially when I'm writing show notes and I want to test software. It's really, really perfect for that. And there are some really cool new additions to the flathub.org website, including a new, like Michael was saying earlier, we love games section. And it's really, really pretty. It's really laid out really nice graphically.
Yes, it's really nicely designed.
Yeah.
There's funny because the Flathub originally was not the greatest looking experience, but they have done a ton of work to make it look better, make it flow better, and props to the team who's working on that. And this new games section is really cool to see because you can get games like that you could just get games from. You can also get emulators and some tools and all sorts of stuff. I will say that it's kind of odd that the game section has also the emulators and the tools there. So that's not that clear. But other than that, it's very cool that that's here.
Yeah. Well, emulators, Flathub has really adopted the emulator space in terms of the software developers making their emulators available for Flathub. And so I was really happy to see that because I know a lot of people who are getting started using emulators and running their own N64 games and old Sony games on the emulators that are available on Flathub. So that is
very cool.
Really awesome. But what's also cool is it's actually showcased directly on the landing page of flathub.org. So right when you go there, if you scroll down, you'll see the We Love Games section. And it's actually been a long planned feature that Flathub has been working on, but it's still a work in progress. And like Michael was suggesting earlier, they could do some improvements with their categories and their organizing. But otherwise, it looks really, really nice for the first time out.
Yeah. And they also make it really cool and really easy to get Lutris and Heroic Games Launcher and Prism
Absolutely,
Launcher
and Steam.
and Steam's. I don't know about Steam necessarily inside of a Flatpak, but you can do it.
Yeah, you can do it.
But you can also get Scum VM and stuff like that. There are certain things like, like the more higher end resource performance stuff for Steam might not be better in like a native packaging, but like emulators and stuff, because they're running an older like platform, so like an N64 emulator wouldn't need as much power. In fact, there are some really cool like things with like certain types of emulators where they're trying to mimic the flaws of the consoles, and there's some games that don't work very well on the emulators because they were designed to take advantage of the bad console functionality of the hardware. And when you have an actual polished computer that's trying to run this, it can't mimic the flaw. And there's like, I think there was like Crash Bandicoot was not playable for a very long time because of that or something. But anyway, this is very cool that we have a whole game section, and you get really easy access to get to these different things and these tools. And also, apparently, Port Proton. I've never even heard of Port Proton, but that's on there too.
Yeah, that's on there too. And a lot of the tools too have been sandboxed, so that's really nice. Yeah,
and most importantly, I know everybody out there, is it on there? Do we have access to this very critical game? Space Cadet Pinball is Flatpaks.
Is in there, and of course the Nautic and the classics like Tux Racer.
Minecraft. The kids still love the Minecraft.
Yes, Minecraft is great.
And I have to just take a moment to search to make sure it's there, because I want to know for sure before I say it, but it better be. So there are multiple. Tetris is not there, but there's a bunch of
like knockoffs,
clones of Tetris. Yeah, so that's good.
Yeah, that's really, really good. And
there should be a Flatpak. So there should be a Flatpak of the Windows 95 free cell. Like there are other versions of free cell. None are more satisfying than the Windows 95 free cell. When you get the cards bouncing and everything else.
Yes.
It's the best. I want that.
It sure is. Yeah, but Flathub did an excellent job there, and we're looking forward to seeing its progress.
Yep.
And they've also have a new on-the-go section on their landing page. And this highlights mobile-friendly Linux apps for phones, tablets, and yes, even the Steam Deck. So apps that work well on those smaller screens are organized really nice, and it encourages developers to actually optimize their apps for mobile, which is really great, because that sometimes has been a problem with Linux apps. But it's getting better.
Yeah, exactly. And also, so there's a lot of cool effort done on the Flatpaks and the Flathub, and also we haven't talked about it before, but the Flathub LLC is potentially in the works. So that would be really cool to see for them to start implementing some like store elements where you can actually purchase different applications, which would be great for the companies who want to support Linux and want to use Flatpaks, but they don't want to not have a functionality to get paid for it, and they want to have their premium, their commercial stuff there, which is very cool. I think that would be awesome to at some point have. Hopefully that is sooner rather than later. But speaking of the Flathub and Flatpaks, Nate has the tip of the week. So take it away, Nate.
I love Flatpaks. So I think Flathub has done a great job of, there hasn't been any like breaches of security but things appear to be well curated in Flathub. I have yet to have an issue with any software that's causing issues. Plus, you have the
there has been some like crypto miner stuff and things like that, but that's That's because like if you open up submissions, there are going to be jerks. Like that's,
Sure.
there is no such thing
Some
as a directory that hasn't been hit by that kind of thing.
Some people do drop their ice cream in the sandbox and mess it up for everybody. I get it. These things do happen.
Yes.
But for the most part, you've got a community of people that are going to help clean that up, people who are motivated and do care. I think there's a lot of that in the whole organization. And so it does make for a positive overall thing. Plus, you have the layer protection of the sandboxing. And, one will know if their resources all of a sudden are being eaten up by something. When you start launching an application, Linux makes it very transparent. You can find that very quickly. So
that's true.
That said, I had an issue with playing some Flatpak games. Not all of them. I've been playing Minecraft pretty regularly using a Flatpak. No issues. I use a legacy launcher. It works best for me. My oldest doesn't like it because you can't do certain things with it. I'm like, hey, I just want to go in, build some things, do some mining, maintain my little farm, and hop out. So I like legacy launcher because it doesn't require a lot. It's less faffing about. It's perfect. Anyway, it's very simple. So no problems. But I did have an issue with I want to play some Doom. My son, I don't know why he likes playing with old computers.
I could not tell you. I have no guess.
But he found my old CDs. He found my old CDs of Doom 2 and Doom, the Ultimate Doom. It was like a triple pack that I got probably, it was early 2000s, so like 5 years ago. And I'm not good at math, at least when it comes to years. So I just want to play it on Linux. I'm pulling the WAD files or WAD. He calls them WAD files, but I think they're called WAD. Anyway,
WAD, yeah.
We had a disagreement there, but maybe he's right. And then I went to play, but I could use the mouse and I could use the arrow keys, but I couldn't use the WASD to do any moving. And so I went through and I tried to fix, that maybe I thought maybe something was wrong with the default key combinations, but it wasn't accepting any input except for the cursor keys. And I was banging my head against the wall. I did a lot of searching. I couldn't find it. Somebody on Linux Saloon said, well, have you tried running it in X11 instead of Wayland? Because I've been running Wayland now for a couple of years, all the time. And so I did that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's working. So then I dug into what's going on here. Maybe there's something wrong with the permissions. It ended up being actually a really simple fix ultimately. And what it was is the Wayland windowing system portal or socket was checked. You just have to uncheck that, and then everything will work properly again. So it's very simple to do. You just go into either with Flat Seal, or if you're running Plasma, they have a Flatpak permissions baked into the KDE Plasma, and you can just uncheck that as well. Uncheck that reason. It's under the advanced permissions, Wayland windowing system. Uncheck that, and then you are able to play your GZ Doom or your Xenotic or whatever it is that's using X Wayland basically still. So until those things are basically cleaned up in some time, that's going to be a problem. But if you have any input issues, and I couldn't find anything else on the internet about this, so maybe it was just me. Not even Grok or Llama or ChatGPT could help me with this one. This is before Blue Sky, Blue. What is Deep Blue? What do we call it? I don't remember.
DeepSeek.
DeepSeek.
It is the blue logo. That's true.
Yeah.
But this is a really interesting tip, and I think that I have not heard of this kind of problem. But as you're describing it, I thought it might actually apply to something I was dealing with, where I was using OBS in Wayland exclusively, and there's a weird component where most things of OBS work great in Flatpak. I mean, the official Linux support of OBS is a Flatpak, but there are certain things that it can't necessarily do properly because of the way that Wayland works and because of the way that keyboard shortcut inputs work. And I might be testing this out to see if I can get this to work, because what I found out is that when I launched OBS in X Wayland entirely, then I was able to get this stuff to function, but it also wasn't as reliable if it was just running on Wayland. So, or on just X. So if it's using one of the two, it was great and it would work in terms of like the overall functionality. But the keyboard inputs for shortcuts would not be detected unless I had the window in like focus. So I didn't want to use the window in focus because that's like when I was doing streaming for Twill, I would want to do like some special shortcuts to activate certain things.
Yeah.
And if I have to have the thing open, then I can't interact with it. So it's not great. So this makes me wonder if I uncheck this, will it make it work? So that'd be very cool.
That's awesome.
Check that out
That's
and see if it works.
So I will let you all know in the future episode if it does work. But that's it for this episode. And we went a little bit over. It's a little bit over. I expected this to happen.
No, we expected it.
Yeah, we expected it to happen, but because we also wanted to have you on for the show, and we could do like as much as possible. Because for those who Ryan was not able to make it for the show because of work, he's just not available. So we had Nate graciously jump in at the last minute and take this spot and help us out making the show. So we appreciate you being on the show and wanted to let people know about you and your experience. And if everybody wants to learn more about Nate and see all the noodlings, is that what you still call it? I think you changed it.
Blatherings.
Blathering.
It's called blathering.
Yeah.
Because if you say like a blog post or a blog, it sounds kind of like it sounds like I should know more things, but these are more just like my my
just random
like,
thoughts.
It's whatever I've tripped over today that kind of tripped me up. I create another blathering about it, essentially.
Nice. There's actually quite a few in there that I've benefited from. There was one I was trying to figure out a solution on openSUSE, and then I randomly found the answer like linked on a Reddit, and it was just taking me to Nate's website. So that was nice. Yeah, awesome. So that was pretty good. But so go to CubicleNate.com and you can check out all that stuff. And you can also go to check out DuxDigital.com and the podcast that he is on, such as Linux Saloon and the Linux Out Loud podcast. You can check those out. Those are fantastic too. So if you want to be part of the Linux Saloon, you can. It's a Linux user group that's done as a live show, so you can join the conversation directly, or you can just watch it live and be part of it in the live chat. So we'll have links in the show notes for all of this. And a big thank you to each and every one of you for supporting us by watching or listening to Destination Linux. However you do it, we love your faces. And you can join us in the Tux Digital Discord by going to tuxdigital.com/Discord. You can hang out, talk about whatever you want. There's tons of different sections for each show, and then also various different topics. We have music and art and all sorts of stuff, even fitness if you're into that. So go to tuxdigital.com/Discord to join the conversation. You can also go to tuxdigital.com/forum to do this similar things, because that's where we post the episodes of the show, and like all the comments that you would see on the website are also are from the forum. So check out the tuxdigital.com/forum to be a part of that. And if you want to support the show and the network, you can go to the store and go to tuxdigital.com/store and get a bunch of cool stuff. Like we have hats, mugs, hoodies, t-shirts, and so much more at tuxdigital.com/store. And finally, if you would like to support the channel and the show and the network and all of that, you can become a patron at tuxdigital.com/membership. You can get access to watch the show live, watch unedited episodes of the show, get some merch discounts, join us in the patron-only post show that happens every week after the show in the Discord server, and so much more. tuxdigital.com/membership.
And make sure to check out all the amazing shows here on Tux Digital. That's right, we have an entire network of shows to fill your whole week with geeky goodness, like watch Nate on Linux Saloon or Linux Out Loud. Head to tuxdigital.com to keep those Linux penguins marching. Nate, it would be our honor if you would say the very last thing in the show.
Everybody, have a wonderful week, and remember that the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
Aww.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
We love you all, and we love you, Nate.